Hope everybody's doing all right. It is a lovely Friday afternoon. We're doing a special edition of the online dinner party, and I've got a great guest that I'm looking forward to hearing from, seeing what he's all about, and all along those lines. I know a lot of people are paying attention to March Madness, yours truly included, because my team made it into the semifinals, and they're going to be playing the number one seed. So, as a Marquette alumni, I'm very curious to see how we do against St. John's, who is the favorite in the Big East. And then, of course, the two-time defending champions, Connecticut, will be going up against Creighton, and then the winners will play each other. So, of course, I'm hoping for the upset and all along those lines. And, of course, a lot of people are also paying attention to the weather and what's going on in the weather space as well, because definitely we had some lovely weather here in Durham, North Carolina. It's probably around 82 degrees or high 70s. It's not that way right now. It's probably in the cooler 60s and 70s, and definitely a little bit on the cooler side. And I think we're supposed to get some rain on Sunday. So it's definitely that kind of weather that goes back and forth, as we are still in technically the winter months, even though spring is literally just around the corner and all along those ways. But definitely a lot's going on, and a lot of people are paying attention to their business sense and their careers as well. So that's partly what Steve Morris is all about. He definitely started his career designing multi-million-dollar racing yachts and building and coaching high-performing teams to help his clients with the world's most demanding yacht races. And I know that we've had another guest on who was part of a yacht team, I believe, out in the West Coast, and all along those lines. I'm oftentimes fascinated by that sport, have even enjoyed watching it when I've watched it on the Olympics and things like that. The gentleman that we had on before that was into yachts and everything was definitely got involved in it during the military time that he had, and all in that space. I'll bring Steve Morris on, learn a little bit about his business career and how he helps businesses and some of his jobs, and also his idea of being part of the racing yacht community and all along those lines. So, Steve, glad that you're able to join me and everything. Don't know if you have any dogs in the fight in terms of March Madness, but it is March Madness, and I know a lot of folks are trying to figure out what's going on right here in the Carolinas. I've got some friends that are diehard Carolina fans. They haven't had the greatest year, and for a number of folks, they are still sitting on the bubble, and a lot of people are speculating that they won't make it, and they'll be going up against their arch rival, Duke, which has beat them twice, and Duke is missing their number one player. So some people are saying that could even hurt their chances should they pull off the upset, and all along those lines. So a lot of people are on pins and needles, and that sounds like business world as well. So just like the business world, they can be on pins and needles. People that are fans of sports can be on pins and needles as well. I know that at one time my alma mater was seated as high as a potential 2 or 3, then we hit a couple of skids. So right now I think we're seated as either or projected as either a 7 or an 8, which means that if you get past the first round, you get to head into either a 1 or a 2 seed, and all along those lines. But hey, that can sometimes be some interesting matches as well. So definitely interested in learning more about your entrepreneurship journey, but also your journey in the space of yacht racing. So we'll just start there. So how did you get into the whole notion of being involved with yachts and all along those lines?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on the show, Mark. I really appreciate it. So I don't have a dog in the March Madness fight, because you can probably tell from this accent of mine, I didn't grow up around these parts, right? And I grew up in New Zealand. And New Zealand is this tiny little island in the South Pacific, surrounded by water. It wasn't so long ago, like 100 and maybe 130, 40 years ago, that the only way that you could get to New Zealand was by a sailing ship, right? To be able to cross the oceans. And so I grew up sailing in New Zealand. It's a big thing down there. And then I had this very fortunate opportunity. My first job out of college was on a professional sailing team. And so I went from studying mechanical engineering to being at the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning, lifting weights off the ground, and, building myself up to be, athletic level quality to be able to go out and sail with this professional sailing team when we were getting an 85-foot ketch ready to go race around the world. So I got a very, very early grounding in my career about what it felt like to be on a truly high-performing team, and about the dedication and the work and the focus that was necessary to be able to truly pull an amazing team together to go do something amazing. And of course, these parallels go through to your basketball teams as well, right? I mean, being able to truly bring those high-performing, super-performing, winning teams together. There's been science to it, and a lot of art to it. The good thing is when I'm working with business leadership teams to help them become those truly great teams, I've got a set of tools and framework that can really get them a long way along that road.
Yeah, along those lines and everything, and definitely we're ready to, after I ask you this question, I'll turn the background noise off and everything along those lines. But I was just wondering how much, because a lot of times people don't think, I know, because I've fantasized about, I'm not a swimmer, even though my dad was an active swimmer and still is an active swimmer, even though he's had some heart issues and all along those lines, but he still is very much involved in swimming. That's part of his exercise regimen and everything. But a lot of people don't think about the physical nature that it takes to guide a yacht or to guide a boat in general. A lot of times people are thinking that this is an easier sport, but when I look at it on the Olympics, whether it's rowing or the yacht races, it does look like it would take almost as much physical workout as it would take to be a football player or a basketball player and all along those lines. So I just wanted your take on that, because I do think that sometimes people think of people on a boat as that being like a softer sport. I don't necessarily buy that argument and everything, but some people may think that it's a softer sport. So what is your take on that when you hear that argument?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's a tremendously physical experience sailing, especially a large boat. I mean, taking down sails and putting up new sails, moving sails around. There's always something to be done, or we're pulling in the ropes, letting things out. There's always a tremendously physical side of the sport. But the thing I love about sailing is that it does combine the physicality of it with strategy and tactics. And part of what I really love doing, especially when I was part of those sailing teams, was navigating. And navigating meaning like defining, like, we know where the destination, where we're trying to get to, and then really being able to plot out around the reefs and the rocks and taking account of the external weather conditions, what's the optimum way for us to be able to get through to the finish. And also, of course, taking into account, where's the competition, right? Because we want to be strategic in how we position the boat relative to the competition. And all of those same things apply in business. And so I help my clients be able to navigate their way through, knowing where you want to get to long-term in the business. How do we navigate our way past the obstacles, the impediments, the things that are in our way? How do we, strategically position our company relative to the competition? And I just find that I've, because of my early training, I have a gift to be able to see those things as I listen to my clients talk about truly what it is that they want to do and where they're trying to get to. Then I can listen to that, but I'm not a consultant, I'm a coach. And meaning I'm coming in and asking them questions about what it is that they think that they should be doing, because the answer is always in the room, about how they're going to navigate the path through to getting what they want.
That makes a lot of sense and everything. Now, when did you first get involved in business? Some entrepreneurs were having that entrepreneurial spirit at a very young age and everything. We've all heard the stories, particularly here in the Americas and everything, about the young gentleman or the young lady that was selling Girl Scout cookies or Boy Scout cookies at an early age, or selling or setting up the lemonade stand at the early age. So some people had that entrepreneurship spirit at a very young age, and some people it came later in life. So at what point did you develop your entrepreneurial journey?
That's a good question. I think, it was fairly early on. So after I completed my work helping this team get ready to go sail around the world, I got a job at a yacht design company up here in Annapolis, Maryland. I got to come to America from New Zealand. And so I spent, a few years just sort of understanding and, how the business worked and, how we worked to help our clients. And then I started to sort of really wonder about the business and, how do we grow the business and what can we be doing to really be able to maximize what it is that we're trying to achieve with the business. So I think I've got that sort of mindset of always looking at how do we maximize, how do we really reach the fullness of our potential in any situation? I also spent 10 years doing government contracting for the US Navy. And so once again, sort of helping my Navy clients be able to strategize and navigate their way through to getting their jobs and projects completed. But at the same time, I was also finding myself drawn into, well, the business that I'm working in, how do I help grow that business? And what is required to be able to do better on that? And ultimately, that led me to doing an executive MBA program at the University of Maryland back in 2011. So it's going back a few years ago now. But that's also been a characteristic of mine, as I kind of see something I want to go get in life, and then I figure out, well, what do I need to learn in order to be able to get there, and then ultimately look at who do I need to be in order to be able to go attain the things that I want to get, my goals in life.
That makes a lot of sense and everything. Along those same lines, there are certain careers that are seen as being more risky than others. And you don't know that much about my own background and everything, but my parents started a radio station in rural North Carolina. So my grandparents, particularly on mom's side, definitely had some rural farmland. So I know how difficult it can be to be involved in the agricultural business. And I have a number of friends, even here in the Durham area, that are in the restaurant business. But I do understand that one of the things that you're doing is you're working on a 31-acre permaculture farm in Colorado and all along those lines. So just wondering, what is your take on this kind of reward risk kind of businesses? Because some people are afraid to go into things because they are so difficult to get into, because we oftentimes hear people, particularly in farming, talking about the big corporate farms and how they are moving out the small farmers and things along those lines. And a lot of my restaurant friends tell me that if they had to do it again, some of them might not go into the restaurant business, because we know the failure rate of restaurants as well. So I just wanted your take on that, because it seems like some of these projects that you've been involved in are very known as risky propositions.
Yeah. Well, and I think that these are very good insights that you have, and that they are true. And the way that we work on this is we look at the risks and then come up with a plan to mitigate them. So yes, I live on a 31-acre farm now in Colorado, and we're putting in a permaculture orchard and food forest, which basically means that we are following nature's principles on how a natural environment gets evolved and grows, which means instead of having it be a monocrop where we've got all of the same, say, trees together, we take something like an apple tree, and then we will surround it with other bushes at different canopy heights with, say, berries or bushes that fix nitrogen into the soil. And we create what are called guilds. And this is a group of plants that support each other. Because when you go into a natural forest or woodlands area, as I say, it's not monocrop. It's a group of plants that support each other. And so looking at different ways that we can do farming to mitigate the risks will improve our success. And so as another story, I just got back from New Zealand, where I'm from, a couple of weeks ago. And I went and visited a farm in the South Island of New Zealand. It's a pretty large farm. It's 16,000 acres. Wow. In New Zealand, we call those a station. So you call it maybe a ranch here in the US, but in New Zealand, it's called a station. And they've got 10,000 merino wool sheep on that station. Now, the very interesting thing about this, and why I'm bringing it up in this podcast, is because the owners of this station are entrepreneurs at their heart who have become farmers, and they're taking a completely different approach to how they farm. Now, these two entrepreneurs started, their very first business was a vodka company called 42 Below. Okay. So they're down in New Zealand, and they started a vodka company, and everybody told them, you must be crazy. You can't do that. There's plenty of vodka brands out there in the world. Who's going to buy a vodka brand from New Zealand? Well, they didn't listen to that. All those naysayers. They took the risk. They built their business. And their entrepreneurial spirit, their marketing savvy, they applied all of that and built this amazing vodka brand, which they grew the business and ended up selling it very successfully to one of those large multinationals. That then gave them the liquidity to go and invest in this sheep station. Now, the way they are approaching this is not to just do it the same way as everybody else has done, but coming at it with the entrepreneurial spirit and looking at, if we can turn some of our fields over to using regenerative farming practices, then we can grow healthier food on those fields that makes the sheep happier when they get in to go eat that, which creates better wool. And there's a thing that when they shear the fleece off of a sheep and they look at the individual strands of wool, that strand of wool contains a record of the sheep's life over the last year or so. And they can see, like, if there are weaknesses along that strand, it means the sheep has been stressed in some way. Maybe they didn't have enough food, enough water, or there are some other external environmental stresses. So they're really looking at creating this regenerative agriculture approach in their farm, a place where the sheep are happy. And therefore the wool is better quality.
Right.
Now, where this results, and why I'm going into this rather long sort of story about this, is producing that high quality wool now allows them to be able to go and market to higher end people who want that high quality wool. So your real, fine Italian suit manufacturers want high quality wool to be able to make their products. And so by taking care of the sheep, producing better wool, they're now able to command a premium price for the wool that they're producing. So they're getting more money, more revenue, more income back into the farm, which allows them to be more financially stable and reduce their risk. So I think, it's a long answer to your question, but taking different approaches, taking ideas from one business area and bringing them into another can be a way that you can mitigate risk and ultimately be more successful with the business venture.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Along those same lines and everything, one of the things that I've heard people say in terms of business entrepreneurship and everything along those lines, and I've seen examples of this, and I'll give you two of the examples that come to my mind and everything. One based on my print journalism background, in addition to the electronic podcasting and radio kind of background as well, and everything of that nature, is this notion of generational connection within entrepreneurship. So a lot of times people, unfortunately, are not as willing to stay in the same business that their family made their money in. Like, even in my own family, I am proud to say that my mother had three sisters. One of the sisters has passed, but part of what they did in their generational wealth and maintaining the generational wealth is that when my grandparents passed on mom's side, they divided our land among the sisters, and the sisters have it in their wills that it will get passed on generation to generation as long as continue that legacy and everything like that. But unfortunately, that doesn't always work, because there is a African-American newspaper here that was very popular, the Carolina Times and everything. And there were three generations, might even have been four generations that ran that paper. But the last generation, they probably decided we didn't want to go into the newspaper business, and therefore that paper no longer exists. And I can say the same thing. As an example, in North Carolina, there's an active, and I know y'all had it in New Zealand because y'all are in an ocean community, as well, an active fishing community. So there were a lot of people that were part of the fishing community, but there were some of this newer generation that didn't want to go deal the hard work of fishing. So some of them have got totally out of that fishing field. So what advice do you give to people in terms of maintaining that generational support? Because I am seeing a number of businesses that are failing because the next generation doesn't want to do whatever that business was, because some of the businesses are hard to do and they're not always the glamorous businesses.
Yes. Well, I don't know if there's any magic wand, Mark. It's I think, parents have aspirations. As parents, we always have aspirations for our kids, right? That my own father, was an ophthalmologist and an eye surgeon, and he really, really wanted me to become an eye surgeon as well and come and, join him and take over his practice. well, I'm sorry, I didn't do that. I'm an engineer at heart, and engineering was my calling. Um, and I think, that is some of the tension in family businesses is, how do we maintain them and how do we create the legacy? And the work that I do with the Entrepreneurial Operating System, the EOS, so I come in and work with a business leadership team to really figure out, like, what is the vision for the business?
Right.
And this is so useful, especially in a family business scenario, because actually getting a group of people around the table to write down and articulate what is the vision for the business, and in particular, what are our core values? Like, what are our core values as a family? Who are we as a family? And how does that extend into who are we in the business? Those things can provide, a clear goal that I think later generations can come and look at, right? And now it's written down. It's not just in the patriarch or the matriarch's head about what the vision for the business is, but we've got it written down. And when we've got it written down and people can see it, then I think they can make better decisions about whether or not they want to be involved. I think part of the other work that we do is really figuring out, like, what's the right structure for the business? Because oftentimes the complication in family businesses is that people are blurring the lines. And what I mean by that is, when we're working in the business, we have a defined role. That's when I work with my clients, I get everybody crystal clear about what they're accountable for in the business. But if we've got an Uncle Bob or a cousin Mary, that's somehow involved in the business, but, they get to take every Friday off and play golf and no one calls them out on it because they're part of the family, right? And so they're not accountable. And if they're not being accountable, then that creates a culture and an environment in the business where that sort of thing is being tolerated, or if it's not being talked about, and then people kind of hold back a little bit and reserve themselves from getting truly involved and invested in the business. In other words, not being completely clear, not being completely aligned on the same page about where we're going can also mean that the business, is weakened, right? And so getting really strong about who's in and who's running the business and what they're accountable for. And it doesn't matter if they're family or not. If you're in the business and you've got a role running in the business, then you need to be accountable. And if we can't hold people accountable in the business, then I think that, as I'm saying, that weakens the business and ultimately, can precipitate its failure.
From a consulting standpoint, and you do a lot of consulting and everything, how important do you think it is? Because I hear a lot of businesses talk about understanding your business plan and understanding your mission goals and all along those lines. But I do find that in certain businesses, and I've had the pleasure of working mostly with nonprofits, but I have worked with a couple of profit businesses as well, that sometimes the initial mission goal may change. They may get a organization may become more useful. They may just have a different direction than the original founders had, and all along those lines. So I just wondering, how important is it for businesses to have those mission goals, but also to evaluate those mission goals? Because I know, like, just recently, one of my nonprofits that I work with and everything just recently changed board chairs and everything. So we've had several executive directors, but I think that this new board chair has got a more useful vision, and they may take the whole organization in a different direction, whereas the other one had a business background. As a matter of fact, if one friend told me this new person is coming in as the chair has a business and a community involvement, whereas the other one had more of a primary business involvement and everything like that. So I'm just wondering, how important is it for organizations to reassess themselves on a regular basis?
Oh, it's incredibly important, Mark. And this is the type of work that I do with my clients. And I think, the importance comes from the fact that the environment outside, the external environment, never remains constant, right? Just like when I'm sailing, the wind shifts, the wind changes, and we have to trim our sails and we have to adapt to the external environment. If we remain too hidebound and stuck, to our last strategic plan, and meanwhile, everything's changed in the external environment, then we lose. And that's, of course, the huge story, I think, from the last 20 years, is Blockbuster Video, right?
Right.
They couldn't change to the brutal reality of the current market conditions, that their business model was wrong, and they're no longer here, right? So it's very important to keep adapting your strategy and keep sort of looking at the horizon and figuring out what's going on. But on the other side of that, I think when you talk about things like values, core values, and by this, when I work with my clients, this is about truly, who are you guys at your core?
Right.
Who are you as a team? Who are you as people showing up in this business? And what do you value about how you work together? Those things do need to stay, more constant. They can be looked at and adjusted and tweaked for sure. But if we don't stay true to our core, then we get pushed around by the waves, and we don't have a solid, consistent way of being able to look at our identity and to make decisions. And I think, that's one of the key things that helps the stability of businesses, is to truly say and to know who we are at our core. And, we are going to do this thing, but we're not going to do that thing, because whatever that decision is going to take us away from who we truly are. So it's a balance. And when I work with my clients, to define 10 years from now, what's your 10-year target? Like, what's the clearly articulated number one goal where we're heading with this business? Okay. And then having defined that, then I bring it down to 3 short years from now. What is this business going to look like? And we're not creating paragraphs. We're just doing 5 to 15 bullet points that really just paint a picture for the organization. And it's a compass heading, right? This is where we're going towards. And then we bring it down to this year. And I get my clients to define 3 to 7 goals. They're honest to goodness top priorities for this year. It's not 23 goals. It's not 37 goals, because if we make everything a priority, then by definition, nothing's a priority, right? 3 to 7, I just keep it absolutely simple. If we can get these 3 things done this year, will it make it a great year? And if I get thumbs up around the table and heck yeah, then I know we're on the right path to being able to keep that company moving forward. But I know, working with my clients, even setting those 3-year pictures and then balancing that against the 1-year goals, every year we need to check back in. And what's going on in the environment? Like, what's happening in the business, and set that new compass heading for the new 3-year picture, set new goals. And we just keep navigating that way through business and through life.
That makes a lot of sense and everything. I know that one of the things that the founders of the network, particularly Nick Palveda, who's a pension attorney, has his own pension company and everything that he runs, but also Kim Calhoun, who's the other founder and is an engineer, talks about, is this notion that we don't do enough education, particularly here in North America, around business and around business planning and just around finances in general. I know that I have friends in the entertainment field, and there is this notion of entertainment being show business, or even the athletes I was talking about earlier being in the sports business. But I know a number of people that feel that they don't learn enough about the business aspect of those careers and everything like that. I don't know how it is in New Zealand, but I just wanted, because you were in the education space and everything, and still are, do we see enough courses that are teaching people how to balance their budget, whether it's their personal budget or even their business budgets, and some of the core things that need to be done, and what kind of ways can we encourage this to happen on a greater way in society?
No, that's a good question. I would say probably there's not enough education around it, and in particular, related to the work that I do, it's there's the setting the strategy for the business, but then there's also looking at how are we working together,
right?
And that's the team building aspect of it. And I really don't think that this gets talked about a lot. And so, the typical sort of scenario for clients that I work with is, we have this huge entrepreneurial drive and spirit in America. And that's what makes this country great, is the ability for somebody to have an idea and to be able to go ahead and do their best to execute on that idea and make it into a business. And so typically we have an entrepreneur with a great idea, right? And then that entrepreneur gets some traction with their idea, and now they need somebody to come join them because they just can't get everything done in the day. And now we've got two people, and then we start growing the business. We get momentum, and we're getting some product market fit, and where sales are going up, right? And now we need to start cloning, the entrepreneur and to be able to get other people in the business all moving together to be able to grow the business successfully. And the art of being able to do that is difficult, to get that entrepreneur to delegate things that they've held very close for a number of years. I mean, I get it. This business is their baby, right? Poured in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into building this business, and it's hard to let go. It's hard to get other people involved. It's hard to build a team. But nevertheless, the work that I do with the Entrepreneur Operating System is I have a framework. I have a start here, go here set of simple, practical tools to help the proper delegation of work, the keeping track, the systemization of a business so that we can grow it.
Yeah. Well, you brought up two interesting concepts and everything. One, I was wondering because you brought up team building, and I know that team building, even in corporate America, because like I said, I'm in the RTP area, and there are a number of companies out here, whether it's GlaxoSmithKline or whether it's Pfizer or Merck's here and a number of other companies, and you'll oftentimes see them doing team building exercises. It might be going to a Bulls game or going out to some sports event, and of course there's the ones that have become kind of like cliche, like the ones where people are falling into each other's laps, and of course there's the running joke of the person dropping the person and all along those lines. So how do you get past the cliches that exist within team building? Because I know that even in church environments and a lot of organizations, they'll go to a game and they might watch the game together, but I don't necessarily see, when I've been to the events, a lot of true engagement in terms of like true team building and all along those lines. It's a good night out. It's a good time for people together. I even see that with my alumni association when I've gone to some events, but I don't always see enough of the true team building and everything. And maybe I'm just misreading it and everything, but I just wanted your take on that, because it does seem that to some degree team building has become a cliche and also kind of like a running joke within some of the sitcoms of the world and detective novels of the world as well. So I just wanted your thoughts on how we can have authentic team building.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely a thing that can induce the inevitable eye roll from people like, oh my gosh, no, we've got to go do a team building event. So in the work that I do, truly building a really great team is more than just going out to, watch a game together. Right. I mean, those things are great. And just to sort of create a little bit of camaraderie, right, and maybe you can make a little bit of a deeper connection. But I think it's not a one and done thing, right? And so many times what I see is, oh my gosh, we haven't done any team building. Quick, somebody, schedule a game, let's go bowling or something right, like that. And if it's a thing in isolation, then I think employees in the business that's what induces the eye roll, because they see it's an isolated thing. And so when I'm working with my clients, I'm trying to help them create a more holistic culture and environment in the business. And so it's got to be a consistent, repeated set of activities that truly do build trust, vulnerability-based trust amongst the team in the business. And so that, as I say, it's not a one and done thing, right? It's got to be, leaders have to show up with a consistent, caring, genuine care and concern for what's going on with their employees, with their people in the business. If they're just phoning it in, people see that. Yeah. And that's where I think, the
eye rolling takes place.
The eye roll sort of comes.
So along those same lines, how important, because I know it's part of what you do in your own building of teams and everything, because I did do some of the research on you and everything along those lines, because that's what I try to do with all my guests, is how important is mindfulness and being connected to the mindful aspect of the team building? You kind of alluded to it to some degree, but one of the greatest team building exercises that I saw recently was, ironically, it was a group of folks that were doing community building and community engagement in an unusual environment, and they carried that environment into the pandemic when we were in the middle of that horrible pandemic and all along those lines. And I know that it's still people that have COVID even to this day, but it's not as bad as it was at the height and everything along those lines. But that being said, there was a group that started, I want to say 10, 15 years ago. I don't remember exactly when they started, but it was the Daybreaker Party. So there were like people that would do parties early in the morning and a lot of that. And they were very much involved with dances, sometimes in unusual environments like rooftops or out in the park and things along those lines. And I noticed that they did that during the pandemic, but they also incorporated yoga, mindfulness practices, discussions around interpersonal connections, but also racial unity and things along those lines in some of their workshops that they were doing. So I've never formally met, but I met her online. The founder, or one of the founders, the lady that was behind Daybreakers and everything, and they seemed like they were very much in that mindfulness space. And I did see a lot of people that were during that time that were very much into yoga, meditation, and a number of other things. So I just wondered how important is that to team building, because even if they were getting people to dance it out and everything, they also would have some fun engagement with it and everything. Even with my friend Brian Showman would do some LinkedIn activities. I think it was Shout Out Saturdays and What's Up Wednesdays, but he might have like your favorite cartoon or some contest and things that were engaging the public and everything along those lines, and lip sync battles and stuff like that. So how important is it to have fun and to put some engagement, but also some mindfulness, if I can use that kind of cliche term as well, into the team building?
Yeah, well, I think yes, it's important to have fun, but when you talk about mindfulness, it touches on something that is incredibly important.
Right.
And so what I see, right, with leadership teams that I'm working with is what's the mindset, what's the energy, what's the presence of leaders in a business? How are they showing up in the business? And so, the mindfulness, the presence is around how do those leaders see the world, right? So do they see the world as a world of abundance out there, or do they show up at work on Monday morning with a scarcity mindset that there isn't enough, right? How do they see each other around the team and around the business? And, when I'm working with or hearing people, talk about like other people in the business in a disparaging way, not really giving people grace or the benefit of the doubt, not seeing that people are really just truly trying to do their best. That mindset comes out in people's language, and they will say things that will, really sort of put a cast on the culture in the organization. And then the mindfulness around how do leaders in the business see themselves? Do they fundamentally see that they are the right person and they've got the capabilities to lead the business? And this happens all the time with entrepreneurs. I know this, and my clients talk about it. They're having to make weighty decisions every single day about the business. And then they lie awake at 2:00 in the morning thinking to themselves, am I the right person to be leading this business? Did I make the right decision yesterday? Right? So that mindset, that's I call it a non-useful thinking, can get in the way and sabotage the ability of leaders to be able to make the right decisions in the business. And so some of the work that I do is to be able to help leaders shift their mindset. And so, in a business, stuff happens every single day, right? Issues come up, and a leader that gets triggered, starts yelling, starts pointing the finger, the blame, all of that stuff. Well, that's not very useful, right? As a leader of a business, you are called on to be able to stand up in your power as a leader and to be calm, right? To be able to stay connected and to be able to make the right decisions, and we need to create. And so within an individual, when you talk about mindfulness, within a leader, we need to be able to create that gap between stimulus and response.
Right.
So when something happens, we can take a breath, get the frontal cortex clutched back in so we can make a right decision and an appropriate response, and then choose the useful response. So I think it's an incredibly important thing, because I feel like, those businesses where we don't have any gap between stimulus and response, and when stuff happens, if the temperature goes up in the room, stuff gets thrown around, we're not in our best place to be able to lead the business and take it forward. But one of the great stories when you talk about from sports, Pete Carroll, the coach for the Seattle Seahawks, talked about that moment when they were just about to win their second Super Bowl, playing New England. New England kicked a field goal and won the game right in the last nanosecond, the last tenth of a second before the end of the game. And he talked about this, like this feeling of, oh my gosh, right? But then the energy of everybody on the team was like, oh my gosh, victory just slipped from our hands there. But he talked about that leader mindset of being able to create that distance between stimulus and response, and knowing that he couldn't go into, having a tantrum on the ground. He was the coach for the team, and he needed to step into his leadership as being the coach and be able to take care of his team, because this disaster had just befallen them, right? And so mindfulness to me is being able to be in control no matter what's going on, right?
Since you say that, because Shaka Smart, who coaches Marquette and also has coached other teams like VCU and Texas and others, he oftentimes talks about that similar kind of notion of being, and he says it's not necessarily religiously being spiritually connected, but the team being connected and being spiritually connected, because they are working as a unit in order to go after a goal. And even after a loss, he will talk about having that connection together and they've even done some team building exercises where they've gone on trips and done other things where they literally were creating that unity of a family and everything. So I think he did that at some of the other programs that he was at, but he definitely did that at Marquette, and he's oftentimes talked about it all along those lines. So how important do you think it is? Because one of the things that I get frustrated by, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around that, it's kind of the flip side of that, is that we all have our dreams and our visions and things along those lines. And I think that sometimes leaders don't always realize that people have their own goals and ambitions, and they try to co-opt your goals and ambitions and make it part of their goals and ambitions. Because I've had a number of business leaders that have tried to tell me, come join their forces and everything, and not realizing that we might not be on the same page and everything like that. So I just wondered, as a business coach, how do you guard from that? Because I do think that some people are so focused on their own goals that they're not thinking about the goals of the rest of the team, and sometimes the goals may not be aligned, but sometimes they are aligned in a different way and everything, that you don't necessarily have to have them do it exactly the way that you've envisioned them doing it. But that's just my take on it. I was wondering your take.
Yeah, no, it's a critical thing that you're talking about, Mark. So when I work with my clients, when you talk about like creating this, almost spiritual connection for a team, right? I at least translate that into, as I was talking about before, core values, like who are we as a team? And when I work with my clients, I'm not just working with, say, the business owner or the CEO and getting their core values and then, promulgating that across the entire business. I work with the leadership team, and we go through a process of really kind of getting to the core of what the company is, right? So we've got multiple voices around the room talking about and trying to identify who are we as a team. And then, so I take that as one core part of creating this articulation of a larger vision for the business and getting it written down. And then to your point of sort of how do we make sure it does get shared by everybody in the team. How do we get everybody on board? Well, we need to tell them, right? And so Patrick Lencioni's written some books around this, but this idea is you can never, as a leader, you can never over communicate what the vision for your business is. In EOS, we say you need to tell them 7 times before they hear it for the first time. These are actual parenting principles. Just repeat, 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 repeat. So then, having articulated the vision for the business, we communicate that. And so truly successful businesses, I think, people who can see their place in the vision and want to be a part of it, then they sign up, they're all in, and they stay with the team. The beauty of also articulating a written vision is if people look at that and say, I don't want to be a part of this. It's not who I am, right? These core values are not things that I share. Well, that's great that we discovered that, because there's somewhere else for you. Yeah. And Jim Collins talks about this in Good to Great, one of the top business books written of all time. He said, that there's a place for everybody in some business, right? And we're doing people a disservice if they are stuck, being unhappy within a business. It's much better to free them up and have them go find their happiness somewhere else. And so...
Go ahead. I was going to say, but the flip side of that, to some degree, is what I've heard people say about the education system in general, which is that we are kind of, and have been doing this for decades, getting people geared to go to work for somebody. And there's definitely an entrepreneurial spirit that's out there as well. So I do know that sometimes people get frustrated by that because they have this notion that, I'm not saying everybody needs to be an entrepreneur, because not everybody's built for entrepreneurship, and we all know that, and you've probably even coached that as well and everything. But I do think that sometimes the school systems get people to think that they have to maybe not go to work for the same person the way that our grandparents did, but that they have to go into the work environment, and that there's not as much encouragement of entrepreneurship as there probably should be and everything. But I don't know if you agree with me or not, because it does seem like the school systems in general, and including the college system, want you to go get the degree, get the education. It was only a secondary education and everything, and then go to work for whatever the business is of somebody else and everything.
Yeah, well, I think you're touching on something that there's some truth to what you're talking about. I guess the way I sort of see it is that people are more engaged now in looking for a business, looking for a vocation, looking for a job where they're feeling fulfilled, not just to get a paycheck, but on a, that spiritually, if you like, or around a values alignment. Like there is an alignment between the employee's values and the company's values. And when we have that alignment, I do think that people are happier and more engaged. Right. And I guess my point is, the more companies can say and identify and say, this is who we are, and these are the things that we believe in, and honestly stand behind it and demonstrate that through their daily actions in the business, and people see that, then they can buy in and be part of the team. Mm-hmm. And as I was sort of saying before, importantly, if this doesn't fit, then no harm, no foul, move on, go find somewhere else. And the more a company can articulate, this is who we are as a team, this is what we believe in, and we can demonstrate this through our actions, then people can see this from the outside. And this helps a company attract more people who want to be part of the team. Mm-hmm. And then I think that sort of becomes one of those beneficial, self-propelling prophecies. Right. I'm mixing my metaphors there, but
no, I got what you were saying and everything. Another thing that we talk about regularly on this show and on this network in general and everything, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, because it does play into the entrepreneurship conversation, is whether I've been talking to creators or whether I've been talking to entrepreneurs or educators. And I know that I've been guilty of it as well, even in some of the lack of going after job opportunities, or even in some cases, lack of going after social environments in terms of social life and all along those lines, this notion of the imposter syndrome. So I was just wondering, is that something that you deal with in your coaching? And if so, how do you address that? Because I find that a lot of people will have a fear of going for business because they're afraid of failure. And sometimes the failure may come to realization, but sometimes from that failure, you can learn something and all along those lines. I'll just give you an example of a failure that I learned from that was quite interesting. A friend of mine, and he may still have this vision, wanted to be a filmmaker. So he went and did the whole the Robert, I'm trying to think of the comedian that did Hollywood Shuffle, Robert Townsend. He did the whole Robert Townsend thing of getting his family and friends and did not raise enough money. So then he approached like every lawyer, Indian chief, and doctor that he could, and then got together with a law firm, set up a luncheon to have the pitch meeting and everything. And I think it was the folks of us that were part of his leadership team and the caterer that were there. Some people drove by, didn't see any cars or enough cars that warranted them stopping by, even though it was a fancy office in the state capitol and all along those lines in a relatively prominent law firm. But we probably was maybe about 5 people that were there because people did not have the bandwagon mentality, or they didn't see enough of a bandwagon to jump on and everything. So I'm thinking that that particular filmmaker at some point may have had the imposter syndrome as well, even though I think he's still, for several years now, been pursuing that film project and everything. So I just wondered, how does the imposter syndrome of this notion of you're not as good as you think you are play into the notion of even your leadership coaching?
Yeah, it can be a tricky thing to deal with. So the way I start working with a client who, is having those feelings is to kind of step back and really get to the core of who that person is truly inside. Because I think, we all have an internal sense of ourself, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it gets buried a little deep down in there because, stuff happens in life. You're talking about, even as a child, right, as we start putting ourselves out there in life, and then you kind of get some message comes back from somebody where, don't pursue art, you're no good at art, stick to math or whatever. You get these more, you're no good at math, you better go choose a different career, right? Like people get these sort of messages all the time, and those messages, you cope with that by putting up a shield, like it's just another layer, right? Well, I'll just hide my authentic self inside and protect myself. I'll never show that to the world again because it didn't get, accepted. And I think over time, right, as we grow up and become adults, we've got a lot of layers built up there. And our true authentic self is buried down somewhere deep inside. And this is where working with a coach can be very beneficial. And we can start peeling away some of those layers and getting down to truly who are you at your core. And then when you have that grounding, that firm inner stance of who I am at my core, then we can start sort of looking at some of these things that crop up. And they are just thoughts, right? These thoughts crop up. I'm no good. I shouldn't be doing this job. I'm an imposter. I'm never going to get there. They're thoughts. And so what I coach my clients on is to be able to just see those thoughts, to be able to take a breath, as I was talking about before, to take a little bit of distance back. They're just thoughts, and to come back and touch upon their inner core, who they truly are inside, and to be able to remind themselves of that, and then to be able to see the gift in whatever situation there is in front of them. And, so your filmmaker friend, yes, having a hard journey, but as a possibility, that's what the universe has put there. It is about the journey, right? And I suspect that individuals probably having to dig deep, is probably having to learn some new resources and skills, is probably having to continue to figure out, their way of being able to navigate through things. And maybe that's a gift.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Maybe that's a gift.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good thing. We'll get ready to wrap it up about another 10 or 15 minutes, but I did have a couple of quick questions I was going to ask you in that same space and all along those lines and everything. Because another thing that another friend of mine talks about a lot of times, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this as well, is this notion of the brain drain and things along those lines. Because I do think that a lot of times people are afraid to give away their knowledge or to give knowledge because they are afraid that it will be used or abused and all along those lines. Because I had a friend of mine, that same friend I was talking about, that he was a rental coordinator for a major local art house theater here in Durham, North Carolina. And he would tell me that everybody's a promoter until it's time to cut the check, meaning that everybody has these great ideas and these grandiose ideas. But then when he would present them the bill, then they might not have the resources that they thought they had. So then they had to reassess whether they could actually do what they thought they could do. And not saying that he discouraged them from doing it, but he just wanted them to understand what they were stepping into. And then the flip side of that is that he's done consulting, I've done consulting, and sometimes people will get all the information that they can from you, but they don't want to give you a consultant check and all along those lines. And that comes to my other question I was going to get into, which is this notion of coaching, because I've got tons of friends that are various types of business coaches, and sometimes people will say that it is a overabundant field and that there are tons of coaches, and I know everybody needs a good coach. There's no doubt about it. Michael Jordan had his own coaches, and not just the coaches of the Bulls, but even when he was in high school, he had coaches as well. So we know that all good leaders need good coaches no matter what field they are in. Even Tiger Woods needed a good coach, and Serena Williams and them had their parents as coaches before they got other coaches as well. So I do know the importance of coaching, but then everybody in the world identifies as a coach, because it seems like it's a field that is overabundant. There's all kinds of coaches, whether it's a health coach, business coach, consultants, and all kinds of other types. So how do you address this notion of being in a what some people consider a very dense field? That's the word I was looking for. Like it's got a lot of people that are in the field.
Yeah, I guess what you're alluding to, it sounds like, if there's not a high barrier to entry because there isn't some sort of external certification, if you like, and except there are in some areas, and there are coaching certifications. So that would be certainly one thing to look at if you wanted to hire a coach is, what qualifications do they have to be a coach?
Right.
And I think, part of the other thing, and this is what I look for when I find a coach for myself, and, what I talk about with my clients or prospects, if they're looking for coaching from me, is, what's the journey that you want to go on, right? And for me, I want to find a coach for myself, that's gone ahead of me, right? That's gone and experienced some things down the journey that I'm wanting to go on in my life. And because then they can be an appropriate coach and guide. Now, we don't have to be doing, all of the same things, right? A great NFL coach didn't have to be, the best quarterback, right? Or necessarily play on the team. I mean, there is a specific expertise to coaching. But, we need to see people that have been able to, to go on the journey to how do we figure out how to get a really great team together, right? How do we manage a group of individuals? How do we get the plays set up, right? So I think looking at a coach in terms of, what have they done? What have they learned? What's their experience been in life might give you some sense about whether this individual, is truly qualified to coach.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's definitely good to do your research, make sure that they are qualified and everything. And sometimes, like you alluded to, the best coaches aren't always the ones that are on the field, and sometimes even as a coach or as a part of the leadership team, sometimes we can shoot ourselves in the foot. I've told this story several times and all along those lines, but I was a horrible track runner. I know I was a horrible track runner. I ran track. It was like the Charlie Brown of my team ran the mile in the 880. Might have had visions of being a marathon runner or a distance runner at the Olympics at some point, but at 60, that's not going to happen. And it was 62 exactly. So that's not going to happen, but it might have been a vision in my high school years and all along those lines. But I knew that there were people that would beat the heck out of me, but I was even back then, I was a good networker and a good recruiter. So I would go get the football players, baseball players, and try to make sure that they were on the team with me. And we won 3 out of my 4 years of being on the track team. My senior year, we lost, and I went to a 3-year high school, but yeah, you could run in the senior year of your junior high. So it was like, that's where the 4 years came from, and all along those lines. But my senior year, I got tired of losing, Steve, and everything. So I recruited a friend of mine that I know I could beat, because he was probably, I'm a little bit on the heavy side now, not overly heavy, but still a little bit heavy. And he's probably around my weight then and everything, or maybe a little bit, but definitely heavier than I was. So I knew that I could beat him and everything. So I think we lost because we didn't have anybody that could do the pole vault or one of the other field events, and because I had recruited somebody that I could beat because I was tired of losing and everything. So I probably cost us that last championship to some degree, and all in that space. And Jimmy unfortunately passed away several decades ago and everything, so I never got a chance to publicly apologize to him. But yeah, I know that that's for the reason that I recruited him and everything. So how much do you find that in business coaching as well, that sometimes people have their own selfish reasons for the actions that they do?
Oh my gosh! Well, that's a big subject that you're bringing up. I feel, I think this can. I guess I get some sort of sense of that. I think in the coaching arena, when when we really start sort of talking about what I would call the greater good. And, particularly with the business leadership team, what's the greater good for the business, right? This is bigger than an individual. So if I hear, people sort of maybe making smaller decisions or making decisions that are inconsistent with what we would call the greater good for the business, then I think that's sort of what you're talking about really, is sort of like, what's going on here? When we have paths to decision making that seem to be a little murky, that aren't clear, that people aren't on the same page about, that does breed cynicism in a business. And so I think it's very important, for me as a coach, right, when I'm working with people, is to truly see, are they talking about consistently talking about a greater vision, a greater good for themselves and for the business, and are they really taking the actions that are consistent with that? Or are they saying, that this is the vision, but then their actions are completely inconsistent with where they said that they wanted to go? And if we've got, some distance there, then we need to look at that, right? And we need to call it out and say, are these things that you are doing, are the actions that you're actually taking truly the right ones to be consistent with the greater good for where you're trying to get to? It's like if you say you want to be on a diet, yet, you're rocking up to McDonald's, getting the double Big Mac, your actions are inconsistent with what you say your vision is, right? So, we can come in, wrap people up with our arms and give them all the love and, attention and things. But ultimately, it's all about your actions. And that's how you show up in the world. And your actions come from your thoughts.
No, the reason I was laughing is because I remember at Marquette when I was there, and it wasn't just the women, it was also the guys as well that would get the what they called the freshman 10, or maybe the freshman 20, or the freshman 25 or whatever. And part of that was just what you said, that they would go and in the cafeteria, whatever the cafeteria was, and get the most healthiest salad that they could, but then they would heap it on with some ice cream and some other things that they were going counter to whatever the dietary food was supposed to be. And then that was why they would wind up getting that freshman 10 or that freshman 20. Of course, it didn't help that Milwaukee is a beer town as well. So you add the beer drinking also, that was probably adding to that. But I do remember that. And like I said, it was in the 80s that I went to school. So we're talking some 40 years ago, but it still resonates with me, the fact that and I think it even existed, Duke, the people that will go on the quote unquote diets when they get into the university setting, whether it's in grad school or in the undergraduate. I'm sure you've even seen that at your university as well, where people will claim that they're on these wonderful diets, and then you're trying to figure out why they've got all that extra dressing that's got fat on it, or the extra helping of ice cream, or whatever else that is counter. Before we get ready to wrap up, and we'll get ready to wrap up shortly, I've certainly enjoyed this conversation, by the way, and everything, and I hope you have as well. But just what is your take? And it comes back to cynicism, and I'm not trying to knock the business coach face and everything, but what is your answer to people that get frustrated by the business coaches because they see this kind of notion of the oversell? And I never got that from you or even my research on you, but there are some of those business coaches that are so busy selling you their books, selling you their products, and all along those lines that can be frustrating and all along those lines. So I just wanted your take on that, because there are a number of them, and I won't name their names, that are quite successful, but every time you turn around, it's like they're giving you this oversell into their product line and not necessarily their coaching line.
Well, I think you're onto it, Mark. I mean, it's sort of like touching into your spidey sense of like, what is this relationship about, right? And when you hire a coach, you are getting into a relationship, right, with that coach, because you're gonna, if we can truly get a great relationship there, then we're going to go deep together, right? And but the coach needs to be there for their client, right? And so I think what you're alluding to is when it seems like the client is being viewed as being there for the coach,
right.
We've got an upside down relationship. And yes, I do see, a lot of this stuff out there in the marketplace as well. And, I think there's a lot of good intentioned coaches out there, and we just show up with, a service mindset, and, to sit down with our clients and to really focus in with them today, right here, right now. What is it that you want to create, and to serve that client without any other agenda in place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Just really quickly, and just a kind of lighthearted questions at the end and everything. Well, there's a question I ask everybody on all my shows and everything. But before I get to that, what is something, because you mentioned New Zealand, and we used to have a regular from New Zealand. I saw him that popped in, because I think he's still in New Zealand and everything. But what's something about your home country that people would be surprised to know and everything if they got to know it from your perspective, because you are a native of New Zealand? So what is something about New Zealand that would surprise our listening audience, and what's something about you that would surprise our listening audience as well? We talked about the yacht racing, but what's another hobby that people might be surprised to know that is an interest of yours?
Oh, I wasn't going to go with a hobby, but what I was going to talk about is the ice cream in New Zealand.
Okay.
So, here in America, we've kind of got this thing, like when you want to, go get some beef or some milk or some dairy products, and you got to look for the grass-fed stuff, right? Because oftentimes it's not, right? Well, in New Zealand, it's all grass-fed. That's all we've got down there is grass, and it makes great milk. Grass-fed cattle produce great milk. And so there's a particular ice cream that's unique in New Zealand that's called Hokey Pokey ice cream. And it's kind of like a vanilla ice cream, but it's got these little flecks of candy that are honey flavored candy in it. And oh my gosh, this stuff is delicious. And of course, it's something I have to restrain myself on when I go back home. But I do like, this is one of my favorite things, is getting to New Zealand and having a nice flat white coffee, which is a type of coffee they make in New Zealand, a little bit like a cappuccino, and some Hokey Pokey ice cream. So there you go. When you go to New Zealand, check those two things out.
Well, that's definitely on my wish list and everything like that. Pod TV, which is the network that this show is on, is a international network and is aired in several countries. Like I said, I know we have a gentleman that regularly comes on from Bangladesh. We've got a gentleman that regularly comes on from Canada. We had one that was regularly coming on from Australia. He's been going through some operations and stuff. And one of our other founders, I think I alluded to him earlier, Nick Palveda, is now living in Spain. So I do know that we are heard in various countries around the world, and I've heard different numbers in the hundreds and all along those lines, as many as some people estimating close to the 200 countries that exist and everything along those lines. But that being said, in all my shows that I do, just because it's kind of my own thing that I like to do in general, just as a word of encouragement, is I love to give my guests a chance to give a word of positivity. And you've done a lot of that doing the show in general. But if you have any word of positivity that you would love to share with our global audience, and also how you can be contacted. And if you have any books that you want to mention as well, that would be the time to do it, as well as we get ready to wrap up. And I'll wrap up with a couple of PSAs afterwards and everything. But anything that we haven't touched that you'd like to touch on, as well as a word of positivity and any other things that you'd like to say, and also how you can be contacted.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Mark. I truly appreciate it. This has been truly a great conversation. I've enjoyed it a lot. So, positivity. I've talked through this podcast, and particularly, about 2/3 of the way through, I was talking about, leadership presence, right? And this being able to create a distance between stimulus and response. And so, the thing that I would just love to say to people out there who are listening, if you find yourself in some situation that's, triggering you and getting you stressed out, is just to take a breath, right? It's a simple thing, but come home to yourself. When you're being triggered, if you can bring yourself back into your body, it's a very simple thing. You can do it through a breath, feel the breath. You can even take a little technique of bringing 2 fingertips together and just feeling that the ridges on your skin, that brings yourself back into your body. These 2 techniques, coming back into your body, can just help you, come down from that triggering event. It's a very simple thing. So I want to give you that tool. I don't have a book to sell. I do have a website, stevemorriscoaching.com. On that website, I've got a free course called Creating Your Morning of Distinction. And it's 10 parts in this course. They're each like 5 minutes long, so it's an hour long total. But I can give you 10 techniques that you can try every morning to help you get your day set on the right compass heading for the day. And they are things like going outside, getting sunlight in your eyes, doing some exercise, a whole bunch of things that I have found so incredibly useful for myself to help myself get on the right course for my day. So that's free. That's right there on my website, stevemorriscoaching.com. And so I'd encourage anybody who's looking for a new morning routine or looking for a better way to get themselves in their right inner stance to get ready for the day, to go check it out.
Well, I definitely appreciate that and everything. Like I said, get ready to wrap up with a couple of PSAs. By the way, I love that you brought up nature, because it's something I bring up regularly on this show, and I do think that we need to do more of that. Sometimes just going outside, and I did it earlier. I just had to go ahead and dump some garbage from the apartment and everything. But I did a couple of days ago enjoy seeing the robins out there playing. They might have even been flirting and courting each other. And everything has been a little bit cooler today. So when I stepped out to run that quick errand, they weren't out there. But even on the past occasions, like not so much this year, but in the past, I've run across rabbits and deers here in the South. So sometimes it can be interesting just observing Mother Nature, and while they're observing you observing them as well, because that can just be something that can be relaxing and all along those lines. So I do appreciate you mentioning that one of your tips is to try to get out and enjoy that fresh air and all in that space. The PSA that I'm going to play is about teachers, and I know you're a teacher, and it's a teacher's award that comes out of Oklahoma and everything. There might be one other one that I play. So before I play this PSA, what is your thoughts around the importance of teachers in general? And then that'll be the last thing I need from you. So since I know you're a coach, but you're also a teacher as well. So what is your thoughts about the importance of teachers and even teacher support staff? Because if I remember correctly, this award is given not just to teachers, but the support staff around them, be that the janitor, the cafeteria worker, the secretary, a number of others that are in the education space. So I just wanted your thoughts about the importance of education and those that are the support people in education as well.
Yeah, well, it's an incredible thing. Where would we be without teachers, right? I think the whole, human race, the culture that we have, everything comes from, the accumulation of knowledge, right? Trying things, learning things, and passing it along, right? If we can't pass along knowledge, and we're all going to have to start off reinventing the wheel ourselves every single day. And then I don't think we maximize ourselves. So I can't say enough about the importance of teachers to be able to pass along knowledge and to be able to help people be able to reach their full potential and live happier, healthier, wonderful lives. Go teachers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we'll go out with this particular award from Oklahoma that honors the teachers and all along those lines. And there might be a couple of others as well. But I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully I'll get you back on a future episode as well. But definitely it was engaging, and I enjoyed learning from you, which is what I love doing on all these conversations, whether it's a one-on-one like this one was or a multiple guest one that I've done as well. But definitely thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully I'll get you back in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Mark. Pretty appreciate it. It's been awesome.
No problem.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you, for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top, only going non-stop.
Are you looking for money-saving strategies for your business and personal finances? Are you tired of working hard every day with little or nothing to show for it? Contact Prosperity Financial Services, LLC right now for your free financial consultation. Call now to reserve yours today, 804-349-8600, 804-349-8600.